And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. Is there intelligent life in the universe? Well, sometimes when you listen to the exchanges in the Republican primary field, you think probably not. Probably not. But we are going to be speaking a little bit later to Lindsey Graham, who has gotten involved in a little bit of a name-calling brawl with Donald Trump. Someone is a jackass, the other person is an idiot and a stiff and a loser. We'll be speaking with Senator Graham about that exchange coming up on the Medved Show. But first, back to that question, is there intelligent life in the universe? Obviously there is. There is right here on planet Earth. But how did that life get here? And how did that life become intelligent? How did we evolve? That is the subject of a fascinating and important new book, which we're going to be debating by one of its authors and one of its prominent critics, both of whom are personal friends of mine and great friends of the show. First of all, the book is called Debating Darwin's Doubt. Darwin's Doubt is the title of a best-selling book by my friend Dr. Stephen Meyer. He is head of the Center for Science and Culture at Discovery Institute. He has his Ph.D. from Cambridge University and is a distinguished scientific commentator. And then we have another Ph.D., also a good friend, the editor-in-chief of Real Clear Science, Alex Berezow. And Alex is the author of his own important book, which is about the way that science is misused by the left. And that's both books, Darwin's Doubt, the new book, Debating Darwin's Doubt, and Alex's book about the misuse of science. That's all Science Left Behind. It's all on our website at michaelmedved.com. Gentlemen, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
thank you, Michael.
Stephen, beyond your original book, Darwin's Doubt, which basically focuses on one of those areas where Charles Darwin himself, in putting forward the theory of evolution, admitted that there was something lacking. What was lacking in your book, Darwin's Doubt, that is now supplemented by this new book?
Well, we didn't have the opportunity to respond to our critics or my critics. And the book inspired a lot of discussion, a lot of critique. And I wrote a number of chapters responding to the various critics, and so did my colleagues at the Discovery Institute. My colleague David Klinghoffer has compiled all of those responses into this handsome new volume.
Alex Berezow, you've taken a look at the book, you've read it. Your response?
There are some things that they have addressed, irreducible complexity being one of the main points of the idea of intelligent design.
Explain irreducible complexity for folks.
Well, I don't want to mess it up. Maybe Steve would do a better job of it. But basically, it's the idea that there are some structures that are so complicated that if you remove any one particular part of it, the whole system just fails and cannot work. And therefore, it had to have been designed specifically.
Like the human eye. I think that's the example.
That's one of the examples used. And I have read plenty of examples of irreducibly complex systems evolving, and we can get a little bit into that a little bit later, but that would be a criticism that I would have of the book.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm focusing on the criticism. The criticism being...
Well, there are examples of irreducibly complex systems evolving, which is the hypothesis would be that irreducibly complex systems cannot evolve.
What's an example of an irreducibly complex system that we know has evolved?
So there is an essay by Dennis Venema at BioLogos, and BioLogos is an institute that is run by Christians. It's they believe in what's called theological evolution or evolutionary creation. They believe in Christianity and evolution. And there is an example of a fruit fly called Drosophila that has evolved over the course of about 3 million years. And its most recent ancestor, there is a gene that duplicated and was present in the modern fruit fly that is not present in some of its closest ancestors. That gene, when it first duplicated, by definition could not have been irreducibly complex because it was not a part of any system. Today, if you remove that gene from Drosophila, from the fruit fly, it will die. And so somehow, over the course of these 3 million years, when it was split from its last ancestor, this protein had somehow gained a function that today is now vital to its life.
A response, Dr. Stephen Meyer.
Well, my book really isn't about the concept of irreducible complexity. It's about something much more fundamental, which is the origin of the information in genes and proteins themselves and where that comes from. And in my original book, Darwin's Doubt, I looked at two big mysteries associated with an event in the history of life known as the Cambrian explosion. The first is the mystery of the missing fossils. We have this abrupt appearance of all these major animal forms in the fossil record, quite in
And when you say all these major animal forms, how many are we talking about?
About 20 of the 26 phyla that have been fossilized in the history of life first come into
phyla,
existence.
that's a whole type of animal.
That's the biggest classification of animal life. So a phylum would represent a distinctive body plan or architecture. And so you get these very new forms of life arising very abruptly in the fossil record. So that's one mystery. Where do they come from? There aren't discernible connections to the alleged ancestors in the lower rock strata. But there's a deeper mystery, and that's a mystery related to it's really an engineering mystery. How would the evolutionary process build all that new form in such a short period of time, especially given what we now know about the centrality of information, both genetic information and other forms of information, to building animal life. If you want to give your computer a new function, you need new code, and it turns out the same thing is true of new forms of animal life, plant life. There's information in the DNA molecule that runs much of the show in living systems.
Do you contest Dr. Berezow's point about the Drosophila, about this fruit fly, where we actually know that this complex gene
No, I wouldn't.
evolved?
I'd interpret it differently, though, that we do know that genes can acquire new functions, but the critical question is, how do we get genes that are different enough that they would produce a fundamentally new protein fold, which is a new way of a new structure at the protein level, and that's something that I show in the book has not been solved by the Darwinian mechanism. It does a good job of explaining small scale variation, but not large scale innovation. One modern evolutionary biologist who's actually a critic of neo-Darwinism says that the theory does a good job of explaining the survival, but not the arrival of the fittest. The small-scale stuff, it does a good job of explaining, not large-scale innovation, and that's what the Cambrian explosion is all about.
Do you disagree, Alex Berezow, about the Darwinian theory explaining the survival, but not the arrival of the fittest?
I would disagree with Dr. Meyer's interpretation of it. I think that the modern molecular tools are relatively recent, and our ability to sequence entire genomes and study them is a development that just happened, within the past 10 years or so. And we're finding that there are gene duplications. This is a rather common thing for the arrival of new information to occur, is through gene duplications and through chromosome inversions, and for regulatory sequences to be turned on or turned off at different times. And all it takes is for a regulatory gene that regulates body plan, for instance, to be turned on at a different time, and you can get a completely different organism that shapes out of that. And so very small tweaks to regulatory genes can have profound anatomical changes on organisms.
1-800-955-1776 is our phone number. Whenever we talk on the Medved Show about any of these issues, I always get some angry email. And the email usually says, wait a minute. Wasn't all this settled at the Scopes trial 90 years ago in 1925 in Dayton, Tennessee, where there were people like Steve Meyer who were trying to ban evolution, and we understood that trial proved that evolution was true. Tell me, why are people who make that criticism of you and of this show, why are they off base?
Well, because the Scopes trial stereotype that's been portrayed by the media, that was amplified by the famous Spencer Tracy film Inherit the Wind, is false. The stereotype is that the debate has been between fundamentalist religion and the enlightened forces of science. And in fact, it's a scientific debate. There are scientific grounds for skepticism about Darwinian evolution, and there were such grounds in Darwin's time. There are especially such grounds today. One of the things I do in the book Darwin's Doubt is I look at all the new theories of evolution that are proliferating, because many of the leading figures in evolutionary biology are quite openly acknowledging that the mutation natural selection mechanism, even with supplementation with mechanisms like gene duplication, that mechanism lacks the creative power that's required to build fundamental innovations in the history of life. And so one way we know that the modern theory the modern Darwinian theory is not adequate is that there are so many evolutionary biologists seeking to generate new theories, formulate new theories. I examined 6 in my book. And they have some advantages over old-fashioned neo-Darwinism, but I argue that they, too, are unable to account for the new information you need to build fundamentally new innovations in the history of life.
We will be right back with Dr. Stephen Meyer and Dr. Alex Berezow debating Darwin's Doubt. That is the name of this new book. Also talk about some of the latest thinking about where life comes from in the first place. How did dead rock evolve into something that was alive? There is a new book on that subject as well. We will get to that and more with your calls coming up.
More of Mike.
21 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show, your daily dose of debate. Debating stuff that really matters at the moment, which is, who are we? How did we get here? How does life exist? By the way, Dr. Berezow, do you believe that we're going to find out that there is intelligent life on Pluto?
No. No.
You would agree with that, Dr. Meyer?
I agree with
Alex, isn't it so extraordinarily cold there that they have ice that is...
Yeah, it's very cold. Very, very, very cold. We will probably never find intelligent life in our lifetimes. And if there's intelligent life out there, it's probably too far away for us to ever communicate with. The universe is big.
You heard about this Russian oligarch. Their full-page ads in every newspaper in the country, really, right? Today, there's a Russian oligarch named Milner who has committed $100 million to the search for intelligent life in the universe.
That's a waste of money. It really is.
Yeah, he could give it to Discovery Institute. We're talking about Debating Darwin's Doubt. That's the name of the new book that is largely put together by the staff at Discovery Institute. It's about the work of Dr. Stephen Meyer. The book is edited by my friend David Klinghoffer, and it is published today. We're debating that book. We're debating Darwin's Doubt, and that's the title of the book, just one debating in the title of the book, with Dr. Alex Berezow, editor-in-chief of Real Clear Science, and Dr. Stephen Meyer, who is director of the Center for Science and Culture at Discovery Institute. All right, Stephen, let's just get this clear and put away, and then we'll have Alex respond. And in the film Inherit the Wind, which you mentioned about the Scopes trial, there's a dramatic scene which I don't believe occurred in the real Scopes trial, where Matthew Harrison Brady, who's the character who's based on William Jennings Bryan, it's played by Frederick March in the movie, is put on the witness stand, and he is asked a series of questions. Let me ask you some of those questions. Do you believe the entire universe was created in 6 days?
No.
Do you believe that the Earth is only 6,000 years old?
No.
Okay.
And here's an interesting tidbit, Michael. Bryan didn't either. He was portrayed as the religious, Bible-thumping fundamentalist, but he was actually an old Earth proponent. He believed the Earth was very ancient and did not accept the 6 24-hour-day young Earth creationism. So even the media presentation of Bryan at the time and in the Inherit the Wind film was inaccurate to who he was, and quite apart from the fact that it didn't portray anything of the real scientific debate going on.
Not at all. And by the way, would you ever favor banning the teaching of evolution, natural selection in public schools?
Of course not. But what I do favor is allowing students to learn about the scientific criticisms of the theory as they are now arising in the peer-reviewed scientific literature in biology and evolutionary biology. If we're going to teach students the theory of evolution, they ought to know the criticisms of the theory that scientists are making. Dr.
Berezow, do you agree with that? Is it appropriate that kids learn the theory of evolution, learn about natural selection, how it works, but also learn some of the challenges to it?
If there are problems with the theory, they come out in the peer-reviewed literature, and any challenges, the challenges tend to be on the fringes of the theory, not at the heart of the theory, which is accepted throughout the biological community. It tends to be at the fringes. How do we draw the evolutionary tree? Did certain organisms evolve a certain way?
By the way, doesn't Dr. Meyer accept the core of the natural selection? Don't you accept how?
The key issue with natural selection and random mutation is whether or not it's a truly creative process. I accept that it's a process that has limited effect, but I don't think it accounts for the major innovations in the history of life. And I don't think the scientific skeptics of the theory who are expressing these concerns in peer-reviewed articles are at the fringes. There was an article recently in Nature. It was actually a debate in Nature between two groups of scientists, and the presenting proposition was, does evolutionary theory need a rethink? And there were a very prominent group of scientists saying, yes, it needs a major rethink, precisely because it can't account for the origin of organismal form, was the way they put it. It's an old gene-based theory, and we know that there are other layers of information in life that have to be accounted for, and mutation and selection doesn't account for that, they argued.
And this is where
this was in Nature, not a fringe publication.
Alex,
this is where I would have a pretty substantial disagreement. Just so that everybody knows, I'm not an atheist. I actually am a Christian as well, and but I fully accept the theory of evolution, and I'm perfectly okay with the idea that God, in His creative power, has endowed the universe with the ability to create. with the laws of motion and with gravitation, we've seen how galaxies have formed out of the gaseous nebula. So I don't have a problem with the idea that evolution is a creative force. I think God can program that into the evolutionary process.
That may be a theological possibility, but it doesn't mean that there's evidence in support of it. You have many materialistic scientists working within the framework of standard evolutionary theory who are now raising questions about the creative power of the mutation selection mechanism. We now know that the big revolution in the second half of the 20th century was the molecular biological revolution, which established that DNA contains digital information, which is directing the construction of proteins and protein machines. If you want to get new innovation in the history of life, the Darwinists said, well, you'd have to mutate that genetic information. But insofar as we are dealing with digital code, we know a lot about digital code from our own experience in software. If you start messing around with a section of functional software and change zeros and ones randomly, you're going to degrade that information long before you generate anything fundamentally new and functional. So the origin of information, the origin of form, these are big problems, and it really has nothing to do with the theology in this case. It's just that nature doesn't seem to do what evolutionary theory requires it to do to account for the big changes in the history of life, not the small stuff.
If we can, let's go to some calls, and let's go to Tom in Glendora, California. Tom, you're on the Medved Show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. Great to hear you 100% back.
Thank you.
Great discussion, too. As a chemistry teacher and certainly no expert, I would take your starting point, Michael. It's amazing how lifeless rock could turn into a living organism. And I would assert that mathematical probability is so overwhelmingly against that. I've heard the idea that if you took enough monkeys and put them on enough computer keyboards, thousands and billions and trillions, they would eventually type Shakespearean plays. I would argue no, they would get 6 feet deep poop on the keyboards. That's just common sense. The monkeys can't create that order. And what gets me to believe that as a chem teacher, and I can throw this out to my students, just asking them to consider it the last day of class, that is the concept of disorder or entropy, entropy being disorder. It's common sense and a law of physics and chemistry that the natural state of things is to quickly go from order to disorder. If you don't believe it, look in my office at Cal State Long Beach. Therefore, the immense order, even in DNA with the base pairings, let alone an eye or a complex human being with a mind and a conscience. Mathematical
that seems to go against the entropic direction, the direction toward entropy, which is part of the way the universe seems to be set up. We'll get a response from Dr. Alex Berezow. He is with us from Real Clear Science, and from Dr. Stephen Meyer from the Center for Science and Culture, and more of your calls coming up.
1-800-955-1776. The Michael Medved Show. That's 1-800.
34 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show, we are debating a new book. It is out today. It is called Debating Darwin's Doubt. You can read about it at our website at michaelmedved.com, and when you're up the website, you can see information about the emergency situation in Haiti right now, which is attracting attention and compassion from Food for the Poor, or you can call that organization directly, 844-863-4673. That's 844-863-4673. Joined by Dr. Alex Berezow and by Dr. Steve Meyer. Alex, you were going to respond right before the break to Tom in Glendora, called with a challenge about entropy, about the general idea that, and you hear this all the time, that if you leave a broken down car in the desert and come back after 20 years, the car doesn't appear to be freshly polished and repaired and ready to run. It appears to be even more broken down. Does that not indicate that there is something beyond randomness directing the progress of life on planet Earth?
Well, of course, and that push is the natural selection. It is a selective force that if you push organisms a certain way, new information is generated through random mutation, and then forces of natural selection will allow the good mutations to survive and the bad ones to fall away. So the idea of entropy is not a good argument here, because yes, the universe as a whole is tending toward this chaos and disorder. That's what the second law tells us. But individual pockets of the universe aren't necessarily going all the way that way. You can have moments of entropy where that's not happening, and but the universe as a whole is. But it's not a good argument. The second law does not disprove evolution.
Stephen Meyer.
I agree with Alex in part and disagree in part. There are two types of negative entropy. Information-rich structures and systems that are simply ordered. A vortex or a tornado is a form of negative entropy. It's order, and we know that can arise through the laws of physics. But the kind of information that we find in a computer program or in a DNA molecule does not arise by the basic laws of physics and chemistry. And natural selection isn't a lot of help there either, because in the natural selection random mutation mechanism, natural selection only acts on what the random mutations produce. The random mutations are the source of the variation and allegedly the information. But your caller was in part right. The odds of finding a functional gene or protein among all the possible combinations is so very, very low that a random search for the information you need to generate a new gene or protein is not an effective way of finding that information. I go into the details of that in the book and provide the calculations.
Let's go to Nick in Philadelphia. You're on the Michael Medved Show with Alex and Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the point that, as far as I understand, that ordered things in the universe, like animals and organisms like that, they give off heat and energy, which adds to the overall entropy of the universe.
Comment?
True, but again, Alex is correct. That's not really relevant to the problem of the origin of biological information, which is a separate question.
Let's go to Derek, Gig Harbor, Washington. You're on the Michael Medved Show with Dr. Stephen Meyer and Dr. Alex Berezow.
Gentlemen, thank you very much, Michael. Glad you're back.
Thank you.
A quick kind of question comment, I guess, is that, words and definitions matter, and it seems like there's a difference between adaptation and evolution. So, a whale that used to walk on land, it adapted to a life in the water, but regardless of how long it's going to be in the water, it'll never evolve into a fish. It's just genetically not going to happen. They'll never have gills. And then two, like you have like a moth or something like that has evolved or adapted to have the face of a snake on its back to, keep predators away. It raises the question is, how does the butterfly know what a snake looks like? And how does it know itself that it itself looks like a snake? And you have like, a walking stick. How does it know that it looks like and is mimicking exactly what a stick looks like?
Dr. Berezow.
Well, that's because the animals don't know. That's the part of the random mutation that occurs whenever a butterfly, has 1,000 babies or whatever, that there's going to be random mutation throughout the offspring. And the ones that are able to survive the environment in which they are born are going to pass on those genes. Let me give you an example. There's a long-term evolutionary experiment involving E. coli. It's a bacteria, gut bacteria. And they took a bacteria that's not able to grow on a particular food source, but after several generations, it was able to grow on this food source because of selective pressure. So we know things like that can evolve.
We will be right back. Debating Darwin's Doubt is the name of the book. Posted on our website at michaelmedved.com. More of your calls coming up.
1-800-955-1776. The Michael Medved Show.
44 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show. Fascinating new book if you like rock'em sock'em debates about stuff that really does matter. The book is called Debating Darwin's Doubt. It's about the best-selling book by Dr. Stephen Meyer. Came out in 2013. This new book, just released today. We are debating the book Debating Darwin's Doubt with Dr. Alex Berezow of Real Clear Science and Dr. Stephen Meyer of the Center for Science and Culture. Okay, before we get to sort of the origins of life, which is kind of an interesting and important question, and obviously very relevant to people who are looking for life elsewhere in the universe, there's a piece in The Guardian where somebody said, I can't wait to ask Donald Trump about evolution. And I don't know whether that's because they think Trump represents some kind of missing link or what they exactly have in mind, but... Okay, it was actually 2008. I think it was Wolf Blitzer or Chris Matthews or someone who wasn't particularly conservative asked all the Republican candidates, how many of you believe in the theory of evolution? And basically, I think only one raised his hand at that point. If this comes up in a presidential debate, Dr. Berezow, what would you say to Republican candidates who may also be evangelical Christians? What should they say if they're asked about this? If you believe in Darwin's theory, if they ask it that way,
sure.
What should they say?
Well, I think they should tell the truth, and if they don't believe in it, then say you don't believe in it. But I would answer if I were to ever run for president, not going to happen, but if I were to run, I would say yes. But let me clarify that this doesn't mean I'm an atheist or a naturalist. I believe in God and I'm a Christian. So, yes, I accept science and religion fully.
So you would say, yes, I believe that the theory of evolution, Darwin's theory, reflects the way that God has created the universe.
Correct. That's a great way to say it.
Dr. Meyer?
I would advise the candidates not to immediately start talking about their religious beliefs. That what they do is they fall into the Bible science stereotype of the debate that we've inherited from the Scopes trial. And the first thing when asked about do they believe in evolution, they say, what do you mean by evolution? I believe in microevolution, but I know that there are scientists who have expressed skepticism and scientific doubts about macroevolution, or about the creative power of mutation and selection. And I think students ought to be free to learn about those doubts when they learn about the theory itself. So teach the theory, teach the scientific challenges to the theory. That's good scientific education, and it promotes scientific literacy.
Okay. And here's what's totally wrong with the question to begin with, is that it doesn't particularly matter if the President of the United States believes in evolution. I want to know what his position is on vaccines, and on genetically modified food, and on energy policy, and on nuclear power.
Your position on vaccines is well known. You've written about it in USA Today. So you're pro-vaccine.
Oh, yes.
Dr. Meyer?
I'm pro-vaccine. Yeah.
All right, good. Some agreement here.
We're finding lots of stuff we agree about during the break.
All right. How about this one? Another new book is called The Vital Question, and it's by another scientist named Nick Lane. And they write about it today in the New York Times. They say that Dr. Lane's view, and this is about the origins of life, the first unicellular, very simple forms of life. How did all this dead rock, where Earth once was about as dead as Pluto, I think most people agree, how did life originate? And Dr. Lane believes that life emerged from towering rock formations on the ocean floor, where heated mineral-laden water spewed from the inner Earth through the rock's hollow network of cell-sized compartments. These rocks contained the ingredients necessary for life's start, but most important, their natural temperature and energy gradients favored the formation of large molecules. By tapping the energy of a restless Earth, Dr. Lane says, a pile of bricks might just become a house. Dr. Berezow, you buy it?
The origin of life is what's called abiogenesis, is perhaps the biggest question in biology. Biologists simply don't know. And where I would disagree with perhaps the intelligent design movement, Dr. Meyer can correct me if I'm wrong, is that pointing to God is sort of against what the scientific method as we understand it in the 21st century does. You can be religious and believe in God, but to say, well, this is evidence of God, I have a theological problem with that as well as a scientific problem with it. It may be that science will figure it out someday. I don't think science is the best tool to find God. I think the best tool to find God is through religion and philosophy and theology.
Dr. Meyer.
I have great disagreements with the author. My first book was about the origin of the first life, and repeatedly people make the same mistake. They think that energy flowing through a system can generate information, but that doesn't follow. If you've got a bunch of Scrabble letters on the table, if you hit them with a big if you shake the table real hard, it's not going to line up and spell.
And also, why has it only happened once? In other words, there's no evidence at all, is there, that these towering rock formations on the ocean's floor are currently producing?
Right, and Alex is right. There are no accepted theories of abiogenesis. Chemical evolutionary theories, it's called, is in complete disarray. Even Richard Dawkins has acknowledged this, and he did on this show. He's a pretty zealous proponent of scientific materialism. In response to Alex's point, though, the case that we're making for intelligent design is actually based on a standard method of scientific reasoning. It's the very same method that Darwin used. It's called inference to the best explanation, where the best explanation is an explanation which invokes a cause which is uniquely known to produce the effect in question. Our case for intelligent design is not directly a case for God. It's a case for an intelligent agent of some kind based on what we know about cause and effect. And what we know about cause and effect is that only minds generate information-rich structures. And therefore, when we find information at the foundation of life, as we do in even simple one-celled organisms, we argue that the best explanation of that is a designing mind of some kind.
Alex, because this gets right to the heart of the disagreement here, do you accept the proposition that only minds create intelligence-rich structures?
That's an open question in biology, and I think that's an open question for Christians who believe in evolution and for...
But if it's an open question in biology, that it's possible that only minds create intelligent, rich structures, doesn't that mean that Darwinian evolution is in fact an open question?
No. No, I would very strongly disagree with that. It's not an open question. But the idea of where does information come from, that's what I was referring to as an open question, is how does information evolve? That is not known. That's what I was referring to when I say that's an open question.
Well, he would say it's not known, but I say we do know of a cause that can produce information, and that is intelligence, and that's why inferring intelligence is the best explanation for the origin of that information.
We'll be right back with Berezow and Meyer coming up.
Michael Medved Show are sponsored by Hillsdale College. Learn more at Medved for Hills.
55 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show, and in the middle of the summer, there is no better time to catch up on your reading, right? Which is why you ought to sign up for Hillsdale College's latest offering. It's free. It's called Great Books 102. The course covers great books from Shakespeare to Mark Twain to Camus. Pretty amazing. You can watch it where you want, costs you absolutely nothing, but can enrich your life in your summer. Go to medvedforhillsdale.com. Sign up right now for the great books. Medvedforhillsdale.com. And speaking of great books, Debating Darwin's Doubt, released today. You can read all about it at our website, and you can read all about the amazingly impressive background of both of my guests, Dr. Alex Berezow, who is editor-in-chief of Real Clear Science, and Dr. Stephen Meyer, who is director of the Center for Science and Culture. Look, we have such limited time. Let's ask for closing statements, 1 minute each. Dr. Berezow.
I just want to say that science and religion are friends, and that we have nothing to fear from science, and science should have nothing to fear from religion, and that we should be able to embrace both fully. And that's why I support what is called theological evolution or evolutionary creation by the good people at BioLogos, which is the idea that science is the best way to explain life, and that includes the origin of life. So the criticism that I would have is sort of a philosophical one, which would be that Søren Kierkegaard said that a Danish philosopher said that the obsessive search for objective truth deadens the soul of faith. And I think that that's where my fundamental disagreement with the intelligent design movement is that you cannot use science to prove that God exists. That's a fundamentally flawed effort. It won't work, and faith does require a bit of a leap.
Dr. Meyer.
I think science and faith go together as well, but I don't think that's the real issue. I think scientifically the issue is the adequacy of the Darwinian explanation that we've all been offered in our high school and science and college textbooks for 150 years. And I think there are many important scientific reasons to question the theory, and I also think science does enable us to detect intelligence, to detect mind. If you walk into the British Museum and you look at the Rosetta Stone, you won't say, gee, isn't it wonderful what wind and erosion did? You'll recognize that you're looking at the byproduct of an intelligent agent. And I think science has been defined too restrictively to exclude the detection of intelligence. And part of what we're doing in the intelligent design movement is not only pointing to evidence of design, digital code, integrated circuitry, nanotechnology inside cells, but we're also challenging that restrictive rule that keeps people from recognizing the products of a designing mind in the history of life.
A quick question in the very brief time remaining to us. Stephen and Alex, you would agree that it is worthwhile even for students, say, in high school, to debate these issues?
I think I'm always in favor of debate, so yes.
And Stephen?
Me too. It's fun.
Let's continue the debate with the likes of Dr. Stephen Meyer and Dr. Alex Berezow. Thank you for both of you for what you do to increase knowledge, understanding, and even controversy, all of which allow the thriving and continued prosperity and progress of this greatest nation on God's green